Good evening and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Eugene Chan. I trust that all of you have had a wonderful Christmas with your family and friends. Christmas time is also a time when we listen to carols and other festive music. And for today's session, we are going to talk about the impact of music on our society with Hong Kong-born cellist Mr. Trey Lee. Mr. Lee is an internationally renowned cellist, currently based in Berlin. He has worked with esteemed conductors, composers, and orchestras worldwide, and plays often at major venues and festivals around the world, including Carnegie Hall and the Lincoln Center. He has even played at the Kremlin and the UN General Assembly Hall. Mr. Lee is also a laureate of major international competitions, including first prize at the International Antonio Yanigro Cello Competition. Then in 2012, Trey was appointed UNICEF Hong Kong ambassador. His virtuoso playing and dedication to charitable causes are also an inspiration to young people in Hong Kong and overseas. Welcome, Trey.
Thank you.
Great to have you. Perhaps we can start sharing a little about your music journey with the viewers. I understand you were born in Hong Kong, but you spent most of your time in New York, and actually you attended the Juilliard Pre-College. Can you tell the viewers a bit more?
Yeah, so I grew up in a musical family, in fact, because my mother is a piano teacher. And so my two older sisters began studying music at a very young age, piano and violin. And then eventually my mom realized that we had the potential for a piano trio in our family.
I see.
And so I was given the task of learning the cello.
Right. That's often the case when you have in families and you get to learn cello. So it was purely by chance that you started to play the cello. I mean, being such a renowned cellist internationally, given all the background I've shared with the viewers, would you say that it was by chance, just as you said, or it was by something else? I'm sure your actual determination makes a big difference.
Well, there's certainly a saying about how becoming a musician, a successful musician at least, is not exactly 90 or 10%, but there's definitely a lot of perspiration and then a little bit of inspiration. And so I think, of course, there was a lot of hard work that went into it. And then at the end of the day, I think it also depends a lot on the way you approach this career as a musician, the way you look at art and its relationship not just to yourself, but also to the wider world. And I think that makes a big difference in terms of what kind of musician you are then.
I mean, I did study your CV because both my kids play cello. And actually, you, when you first graduated, you went to Harvard to actually do economics, but then you turned back to music. What actually happened then?
Well, I think I was perhaps influenced a lot by the thinking that one certainly needs to be prepared for a secure future. And so I thought studying economics and perhaps working in a lucrative field eventually would help me secure that kind of a life. But I think along the way I realized that this life that I was pursuing perhaps needed something different, or that I was interested in something different for this life. And with the music background, of course, then I could see that, well, there are alternative routes to pursue one's happiness. I think the pursuit of happiness, in fact, is something that a lot of us realize in different parts of our lives, during different stages of our lives. And for me, I feel very lucky that it came to me at a relatively early stage, or at least it wasn't too late to go back into music.
Right, very often, you know, most of the parents, especially when they're having a kid that's so talented in whatever music instrument they're playing, they'll start to say, hey, you better concentrate on the studies. You can treat this as a sort of hobby. So I'm sure that went through your mind. That's the reason why you went to study at Harvard. To be successful, I mean, actually, ask a very primitive question. How many hours of practice do you still have to do daily?
Well, I think...
Do you have to practice still?
Well, it depends, again, on the stage of your career, I believe. Certainly when we're young and we're still trying to master our instruments, I've done as much as 8 hours a day.
Really?
Of course, eventually, once you I wouldn't say master the instrument because I don't think anyone ever really truly masters it, but once you become more comfortable and confident in your abilities, then of course it goes down. And right now it just depends. If I have a lot of concerts and different repertoire I have to prepare, then of course maybe 4 or 5 hours. But if it's only a few pieces that I have to prepare for some concerts, and sometimes just 1 or 2.
Right. And how do you keep up your passion? I mean, you've been doing this for like quite some time, and every time when I talk to you, I can feel the energy burning. What keeps up the passion?
I think we're extremely lucky as musicians in that what we do is sort of refilling the inspiration every time you hear it, because it's such incredible music, you know, these works of art that inspires you naturally. No matter how many times you've heard it, the works of the greatest composers will always be that, which is just great. You know, you look at a painting, you'll never get tired of looking at the masterpieces.
Right.
The same as music.
Do you ever have a feeling of burnout? You want to say, all right, let's forget it for the time being, I want to go for holiday.
Absolutely.
It happened as well.
Absolutely, because, I mean, sometimes your body can only take so much, not to mention your brain. And, you know, playing an instrument, being a musician, is equal parts physical and intellectual exertions. So it's, I mean, I've certainly hit the wall many times.
Certainly this is a very reassuring message to our viewers, because I'm sure many of themselves or their family will have encountered the same problem. Playing a cello, we know that it's quite a large piece of instrument. Do you have encountered problems when you have to actually travel with it? Oh,
tons. I have to say, this is perhaps the time when I wish I had played something else. When I'm at an airport, you know, and I have to lug the thing around, and then it always has to sit next to me on the airplane by the window, because it cannot block other passengers during an emergency in case something happens. And, you know, it's the price we have to pay, unfortunately.
Right, and you know that having a very top-class musical instrument compared to an average instrument, of course, the sound will be different. Certainly, so if you have the resources, you'll be in a better off position. What would you say to those people who may not have the resources and still want to play great music?
Well, first of all, I think we're very lucky that we're in an age now where a lot of modern and relatively well-priced instruments are everywhere now, because the science and the technique has improved so much. So that's already a big advantage for our younger players who may not have access to the great old Italian masterpieces. But second of all, I have to say that when you have talent, when you work hard and you can show your hard work and your talent, no matter how bad your instrument is, that's only one part of your performance. People who really know how to listen will be able to tell that you have a certain personality in your music, certain musicality, and certain intellectuality, or, I'm sorry, is that even a word, right? But a certain way of expressing yourself that's unique. And so even if you have the worst instrument in the world, people who know how to listen can identify it immediately.
Extremely reassuring message you have just made. Another thing I want to ask you, you've been playing, I know, mainly Western classical pieces. You told me earlier you do play some Chinese sort of music, but playing majority of the time Western classical music, do you, as a Chinese especially, do you ever encounter any actually problems or challenges? And being a maestro in Western classical music now, how will you reflect on my comments?
Well, I think certainly, perhaps not too far in the distant past, that has been an issue for non-Caucasian musicians, let's say, because when you're playing in Europe, let's say in the olden days, perhaps they would think, oh, they don't understand our music. But I believe now, in this day and age, Western classical music has become so international and such a lingua franca that I don't think it's such a big question mark anymore when you go on stage and you don't look like this traditional, stereotypical European master musician. Now people have the chance to prove themselves, I think. And in fact, many of us or Asian musicians have already proven ourselves on the international stage.
Right.
And so I feel very lucky that today we don't need to think so much about that anymore.
Yeah, fantastic comment you just made. Time has gone very fast. I'll ask you the last question before the break and just sort of quick answer. People do have unforgettable moments in playing the cello, especially in your career when you sort of perform. Will you say there are some touching moments that actually you can share with us?
I believe going back to just what makes us, what inspires us, and what keeps me going as a musician is that in every great piece of music, there are moments that the composer wrote down and that we have to recreate on the instrument. And it's those moments that you're saying, you know, the touching moments.
Right.
When even the most simple tune, you know, in the Dvorak Cello Concerto, of course, the second theme melody is one of the most beautiful, you know, pastoral, pristine, or angelic, however you want to describe it, kind of a song. You know, when you can just play those few notes, sometimes you think, wow, this is why I'm alive, and this is why I'm doing this.
Let's take a break now, viewers. Stay tuned. We will see you right back here on Straight Talk in just a few moments. Thank you for staying with us. We have the renowned cellist, Mr. Trey Lee, on the show this evening, and we have been talking about the impact of music on society. So, Trey, we spent a lot of time understanding your training, your feelings, and your views on the cello playing in general. So, coming back to the title of the show tonight, do you believe music has an impact on the society, and how does it do it?
I think that's a very interesting question because there are, for me, at least two ways of looking at it.
Right.
First of all, as a musician, what's very important to me is to look at it the other way around, which is how society impacts music. Because I believe music is a reflection of our world. And so if you play music without thinking about anything else, without thinking about how the music, where it comes from, and what it means to people, and what it meant to the composer, and how it should be performed as a result, then I think that really limits the possibility of how you can understand the music and then how you can transmit that to the audience. So I think it's very important as a musician to look at society and the world around you and say, what's happening? And how does my music reflect that?
Right.
At the same time, what you're asking before also is how does music affect society? I think that's can be answered in many, many different levels. First of all, you know, in Hong Kong and in Asia in general, when Western artists come, one of the first questions they always ask is, why are there so many more young people at concerts here? And
in Hong Kong?
In Hong Kong, especially in Hong Kong, and also in the rest of Asia, I think, compared to the West. And I always have to come up with the answers for this. And one of them, I believe, is that people here, especially parents and teachers, educators, but society at large, look at music, whether it's classical Western music or just music in general, folk music, any kind, as part of your education. You know, it's not just for enjoyment. Of course it should be, but it has much more useful and powerful effects on the rest of society.
When you mention about that, we know that Hong Kong parents, so-called tiger mums and tiger dads, I mean, music is something that they want to push the kids and sort of excel, and they spend a lot of time on the good teachers and good instruments, as I bring up earlier in the show. I mean, so what you're saying is the Hong Kong youth stands very well compared to, other kids, in the rest of the world. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think they're very lucky in that they, on average, have more exposure to musical education than the rest of the world because, relatively speaking, many countries around the world right now, you go to any society, cities and schools, they are cutting back. Whereas in Hong Kong, in Asia, there's still a lot more emphasis. It may also be decreasing. I don't know, whether that's a priority anymore for everybody. But when I look at other places around the world, Hong Kong and just this region of the world has much more exposure for the young people to classical music.
Right, so if that's the case, you're saying that Hong Kong is quite favorable for the musicians or the music talents to develop.
Absolutely, I think so. And another thing that I've seen develop here is not just the development of young people's musical abilities, but also society's attitude towards a career in music and the arts. We have the West Kowloon Cultural District. We have so many ensembles now and groups, NGOs and cultural NGOs, and support from various sectors of society here. And I see that blooming and blossoming everywhere. And even with Music and Society that I had, we have been really astounded by the level of young Hong Kong musicians playing. And when we introduce them to overseas musicians and they play together, they're also astounded by that.
Right.
So I think this is definitely a very, very positive development.
Right. Thank you for very encouraging remarks to our parents on the right by the television right now, because their efforts has paid off, because Hong Kong students or youth are being regarded very highly in the world. And with our national 14th five-year plan, where Hong Kong wanted Hong Kong to be part of a international cultural exchange center or arts and all that. So we are in a very favorable position.
I believe music especially is perhaps one of the best tools for this kind of cultural exchange, because obviously everyone always says it's an international language. It doesn't require spoken words, and everyone can understand it easily. And to take that to the next level, I think when you have artists and musicians working together from different cultures, that adds and elevates this kind of cross-cultural collaboration. So I think this is definitely something that is going in the right direction, and we need to keep going forward with it.
Right. I mean, you, as I mentioned earlier in your introduction, you played at or performed at very prestigious venues worldwide, including the Carnegie Hall and the Kremlin. So you can say that music does serve as a universal language that transcends cultural and linguistic barriers. Would you agree to that? Absolutely.
I think that happens every day. Wherever I go to perform, it's happening. It's very interesting when you have musicians from different countries and different continents getting together all the time. At first, they don't know each other at all, but by the end of the first day of rehearsals, usually there's a bond there already, an unspoken bond that you just know is there, and you feel it's there, even if you still can't speak the same language at the end of the day. But somehow, you feel like you've experienced something that's human, really transcendent together.
Right. As I said earlier, you're also a UNICEF Hong Kong ambassador, and you've been involved in inspiring young people. I mean, can you tell the viewers how does the music how does it resonate and influence our younger generation? How does it work?
That's a very interesting question, because some people would say that, classical music is old. It's centuries old. Well, I have some very interesting examples from my own to keep myself inspired. For example, music of the Romantic era from the 19th century. A lot of that was inspired by nature as a reaction against the age of reason, because people had become too intellectual and overthought things, they thought. They weren't trusting their heart anymore and their emotions. And today, if we look at things like what's happening to our environment globally, Hong Kong right now this month is incredibly hot until this week. And these are things that are reflected in the music. When I play music, for example, Brahms and Schubert and things like that, they were so inspired by the nature around them that today when I play it, I think, yeah, this is the nature that we should all be living in, but we're not anymore. And so there are always connections. We also have this concert series from Musicus called Musicus Heritage, Musicus Heritage Stories now, where we go to our heritage sites around the city in Hong Kong and perform in them. Beautiful. And this is something that again, it's not just about music. It's about our common shared heritage.
Right.
And then when the audience comes in, and also we bring this to local schools, we tell them the stories through music. And so music has such an influence beyond just pure entertainment or enjoyment. It tells stories.
Right.
It keeps a history of our world. You know, there's so many possibilities with it.
Right, Trey, you were also involved in the Imagine Music Recording Project to mark the 25th anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. People say that music can be a tool for social change. I mean, basically, you have just elaborated that and contribute to important causes. I'm sure you agree. How successful this has been, say, for Hong Kong? I mean, we've been through some tough times and the world is not really united at the moment. I mean, how can you see music play a part in this?
I have to say, when we play music, whoever I'm playing with, I have no idea most of the time, unless if they say it out loud, but I have no idea what they're thinking. Right. You know, all I can tell is their musical personality, which at the end of the day, most of the time is something really beautiful. You know, there's something when we just rely on our hearts and our minds put together to create this musical performance. You know, I think you go way beyond all of these talk of other things, and it's just something that's so pure and that's so universal that you, at least momentarily, have the ability to forget all the negative stuff. Right.
The last part I wanted to share, ask your feelings are on. We just had the COVID, and during that time, a lot of live concerts were cancelled around the world. But then we do have, I mean, virtual collaborations, live streams, and concerts. Would you say music is quite like a silver bullet at that particular time, sort of be a panacea for the conflicts at that time? What do you say to that?
I think it was helpful up to a certain point.
Right.
Because, of course, when we were all locked at home inside, everybody in the whole world was, and there was nothing to do. And luckily we had the internet, which brought us a lot of music, but I think those of us who were able to play music were even luckier.
Right.
Because we could sort of inspire ourselves and entertain ourselves and challenge ourselves. Whereas those who could only consume music realized how wonderful live performances were.
Right. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have this evening. And thank you, Trey, for sharing your insights into how music can transcend boundaries and be used as a force for positive change and social cohesion. I'm going to share a quote from Trey himself. Art has the ability to make one look at the world from a different perspective. Have a nice evening and see you next week.